Hey fellow gliders, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at how to create streaks in your app. So this is going to be your current streak or your longest streak of doing something in the app. And in our tutorial today, we're going to show you how to create streaks based on a user creating posts, right? And we're going to track how many days they've completed posts and kind of track their streak, their longest streak and their current streak. So this is pretty tricky to do. This is going to be definitely an advanced concept. So I recommend pausing the video whenever you can and kind of working alongside with me. All right, so the tricky thing about creating streaks in Glide is that you need to be able to determine a sequence of events. And in Glide is not a great way to do that. So we have to use some trickery in order to find and create those sequences. So stick with me here and we're going to show you how to do this. All right, so the very first thing here, we see that we have a list of posts. These posts have different timestamps, and we can see that some of them have been in sequence, some of them are not. So the earliest is 15, 16, then we skip 17 and 18, then we're at 19, March 20th, 21st, and then 22nd. So there was a 4-day streak there, and then it stopped, and then we're back at April 1st again. So their current streak should be 1 day, and then their longest streak should be 4 days worth of posts. So how do we craft this? Let's go to the data editor and let's go to the post section here. So there's not a lot to work with in terms of being able to sequence events here. Right? The only thing we have to work with here is the timestamp. And since we're basing our streak off of the timestamp, we have to create some logic in order to create a sequence from these dates. So in order to create a sequence, we have to realize the relationship between a particular record with a date and its before and after. And so we want to create some relations between one record and the records directly before and after it chronologically in order. Now, in order to make those relations, these two values have to match identically. And so because we have different times as opposed to just the dates, right, we need to be able to do some math here on these dates in order to get a consistent value. So the first thing I'm going to do with these timestamps is kind of simplify them to just the date and not the time. We can't do something simple like date only here, because even though it just shows us the date, the time is still there in the back end. We also can't do this and then create a template to freeze this as text, because we still need this to be a date value. So what we're going to do here is create some math to strip away the time, so that way it's just the date, or that's left, yeah. All right, so we're going to do a plus and a minus. We'll get the day after and the day before, and we're going to use those in two different logics moving forward here. All right, so the very first thing is we're going to create a math column, and we'll call this, let's get just the date. So this is day only. All right, so the formula here is going to be the date. Let's get rid of that C just so it's easier to read. All right, so the date minus, we're going to subtract the hour of the date. We're going to subtract the minutes of the date, and we're going to subtract the seconds of that date. And then we also have to do some divisions here, because whenever you say hour of date, it puts it in days. So we have to divide by how many hours are in a day, how many minutes are in a day, and how many seconds are in a day. All right, so when we take the date and replace it with our timestamp, okay, and hit done, all right, we can see that now we have the exact same date, but it's stripped away the time. So now our time is even at 12 a.m. All right, so once again, so you see that formula, we're taking the original timestamp, subtracting the hour, the minute, and the second. So feel free to pause this video and create that formula for yourself. All right, once you've done that, I'm going to make this just the date only here. And now it's okay to do this because we know that the time in the back end is the same. Hit done. All right, so this is our day only. And now what we're going to do is grab the day only, and we're going to add 1 to get the next day, and then the day minus 1 to get the previous day. So I'm just going to duplicate this column. We'll say day only plus 1, and I'll just wrap all of this in a parentheses, and then add 1. All right, done. So we see we've added a day. And again, on the back end, the time is still 12 a.m., which is nice, because then we can make a relation. And then we'll do the same thing. I'll duplicate this, and we'll just subtract 1. to get the previous day. I'll just subtract 1 from my equation. All right. So now we have +1, -1, great. Now, before we make relations from one of these dates to the other, we also have to create a unique value per user here, because right now we have only just this one person posting, but once we have multiple people posting, we're going to want to track the individual streaks of those users, right? And so because of that, we can't just simply use the dates, because if 2 people post on March 16th, then how does Glide know which user is getting that streak? So we have to create a unique ID that not only includes this day, but also includes the user as well. This can be any value that's unique to that user. I'm using email here, but it could certainly be like the user ID if that's what you're writing to the sheet. Okay, so we're going to do a couple more columns here. The first thing is we're going to grab the day only, and we're going to add on to that the email address. So we'll say here, I'm going to actually duplicate day only, just because it already has the text in there. I'll say day only plus email. This will not be a math column, but rather a template column, and we'll just do 1-2. So 1, 2. I'm going to replace 1 with the day only, and then 2 with the email, like that. All right, so now we have a unique key that relates the time of that streak and also the user of that streak. Okay, after we've created our day only plus email, then we're going to create another unique value. So I'll just duplicate this. And this is going to be the date only -1 plus the email. And so instead of replacing 1 with day only, we'll replace it with the day only -1, like that. Okay, so now we have 2 unique values that not only match the date of the post, but also match the user. And now we can make a relation between these 2 values with making sure that the relations that we're making aren't going to cross paths with any other user. All right, so let's go ahead and create our relation. We're going to call this relation to the previous day. And we'll create a relation column here. And we're going to match the day only -1 email. And we're going to match the values in the posts, the day only plus email, like this. Okay. All right, so what that does is now we see what we're looking for is the blanks. You see these blanks here? Right? Because what it did is it matched all of the rows which had a previous day. And we're looking for the records that don't have a previous day, these ones, because we know that those are where the streak starts. All right, so because this is where the streak starts, we want to create a value in these blank values there. So we're going to create an if then else column here to determine that if it's blank, write a value. So we're going to say if start of streak, then let's write the what do we call this? The post. We'll call this the post ID. Post ID. All right. So these day only emails, these are gonna be like post IDs. So we're gonna do an if then else, and we're gonna say if this relation to previous day is empty, then we're gonna write in this day only email, like that. All right. So these are all of the IDs where a streak begins. So now that we know the start of our streaks, now we have to create some groupings based on the starts here. And there's, again, not a lot to go off of. So what we have to do is do some array magic in Glide in order to craft a relation between this value, right, and the other records that happen to fall in sequence with these. And again, the only way we can really do sequences in Glide is with some array type magic. So first thing we have to do is get a relation of all of the posts by a particular user. All right, so we're going to go ahead and call this relation to all user posts. And we're going to create a relation here, and we're going to match the email address to all of the posts by that same user. Okay, so it will match multiple. And so in each of these rows now, right, we're going to grab the records that match this email. So it's going to duplicate these values for every single time that email address appears. So these are all of the times that a particular email address has posted something. All right, from here, we're going to grab the post ID of these records. So we're going to grab the, let's see, what are we going to call this? We'll call this post IDs of user. And this will be a lookup column because we want to create an array. We're going to do a lookup of that relation to all user posts. And again, we're going to grab that post ID, which in this case is this day only plus email. All right, so that gives us an array of all of the post IDs by this user. All right, and it's going to replicate itself in every single record which that email address appears. All right. Okay, so from here, we're going to create a, well, caveat. We can continue on with our logic. One thing I want to do actually first is to sort these arrays here. So if we're going to sort, we probably want to sort by number. So I think what I'm going to do is craft a new ID, which I can sort alphabetically by the date. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take each of these columns here and craft a value based on that date. So I'm going to add a column to the right. I'm going to say, let's actually do a duplicate. So this will be day only value. I'm going to wrap all of this equation. I'm going to grab the year. Times 10,000 plus the month of that same equation times 100 plus the day of that equation. Okay, so what that ends up giving us is a numerical value of that date, starting with the year, then the month, then the day. See that? Oh, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do the timestamp. I can just do, hold on. I can just do, instead of the timestamp, I'll just reference the date. This is day only. It's the same thing. So that way I don't have to do this complicated formula in here. Like that, okay. Same results. So this is the day only value. I'm going to duplicate this. And this is my day only plus 1 value. So, but DO now stands for day only plus 1. Duplicate. This will be my day only minus 1 value. Like that. Okay, so now when I craft my keys here, I think I'm going to use, instead of the day only, I'm going to use the day only value. So that way I have a numerical value to sort by. And this is my day only minus 1 value. All right, and it gives us the same relations moving forward. All right, but the benefit of doing that, again, is that now we can sort this array, right? And the reason why you might want to sort is that, let's say you still want to calculate a streak, but you're allowing your users to make retroactive posts. Now, in our example here, we're probably never going to allow a user to create a new post on a previous day. But if you're creating a task app, right, or a project app, or some other thing where you're allowing them to select the date of the post, then you definitely want to sort your posts. You sort this array so that way you can calculate the streak correctly. So we'll add it in here for good measure. All right, so we're going to create, so this post IDs of user is an array already, but we're going to sort this array. So I'm just going to duplicate this. Post IDs of user sorted. And this is going to be an array sort array. And we're going to sort the post IDs of user. Done. All right, so in our example, these two columns look exactly the same. However, let's say this was actually, instead of the 15th, we actually posted this one on the 17th. Here. Like that. So these two dates are out of order, right? But if you look at our array here, it still shows the 16th being first now, rather than the 17th. So in that way, we can calculate our streak sequence appropriately. Okay, I'm going to switch this back just so it doesn't confuse me in terms of building out this logic. Okay. All right, so next we have the sorted array, and now we need to determine the index of this sort, right? We want to figure out numbers. Like where do these different values fall in line, right? We have the start here, but what order is this in? Right, so we're going to create a index column. We'll call this start of the streak index, and this will be an array find element index column, and this is going to give us the location or the sequence of individual records in that sorted array. So the find element index. Our values is going to be the sorted array, and we're going to find this start of streak post ID. Boom. And we'll set precision to 1. All right, so now we have an order of events, right? So we can see here that this has 7 records, right? And of those 7 records, the first record, which is location 0 or position 0 in the array. That first record was the start of a streak. The third record, which is position 2, is the start of a new streak. And position 6 is the start of a third streak, right? And so now we want to figure out, we need to basically be able to fill in these other values here, right? In order to create a grouping of sorts. Because really, ultimate what we want would be something like 0, 0, and then 2, 2, 2, 2, and then 6, 6, you know, if it keeps on going with that same sequence here. And so that way, when we have a common grouping, then we can start doing some more relations to determine the sequence and the streak. However, not a great way to do that in Glide. So what we have to do is craft it ourselves. So this part took me the longest to figure out, but what I ended up working is creating a new array of these start index. So I'm going to create a new array by using a lookup column. And we're going to call this the start streak index array. And we're going to look up the all posts, right? And we're going to look up the start streak index. And this will give us a new array of all of the records where there's a new start of the streak per user, right? Because again, this relation is all based on the user email. So we have a 0, a 2, and a 6. All right, so this is the start of the array. Oh, yeah, we still need the master index 1 through 7 or 0 through 6 here. So we actually need one more here. We'll just call this posts index or user posts. Post index of user or user post. Either way, doesn't matter. And this is going to be an array find element index. the values are going to be the post IDs of users sorted. And we're finding that post ID, which again is the day only plus email template, like that. Okay, so now we have a master index, right, of all of the posts, and this is unique per user. So if a new user were to create a new post here, they would start off at 0. So the next thing we want to do in order to fill in these gaps is to add a new value to this array. And we're going to add the index that's currently missing to this array here. So I'm going to use this new column called makeArray. And we're going to call this the startStreakIndex array. But we're also adding the index to it. And we actually want the index first. So we'll say user post index plus startStreakIndex array. Make array, we're in 2 items. The first array item is the user post indexed, which again just gives us 1 through 6, 0 through 6. And then the second item is going to be the startStreakIndex array, like that. Okay, so this includes all of the values that are starting off in the array, 0, 2, and 6, and all of them. But then where does this value live in between these start values, right? So then last thing here is to sort this array. So I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this so I don't have to rename it. But I'll just add it to the end, sorted. And instead of a make array, it'll be an array sort. And we're going to sort this user post index plus startStreakIndex array index. Done. All right, so it's the same values as this make array, but they've been sorted. All right, so we still have our 0, 2, and 6, which is the start of every streak. But now we're also including the actual indice, right, index of the post as part of that array, so we can determine where sequentially does this value live in relationship to the start of the new streaks. All right. So now that we have that, we now need to find where this value lives inside of the start streak. So we're going to do another array here, another find index. And this will be the index. Well, let's see. I can just duplicate this column. Duplicate. And this will be at the start here, the index of that big long thing. This will be an array, find element index, and the values here are going to be the user post index start streak index array sorted. And we're finding the actual index, this user post index in here. Precision 1, no separator, done. All right, so hopefully what this shows you is that we have some groupings that are starting to appear, right? At the start of the streak, we have a 0 and then a 0. Okay, then we have a 1, 1. Okay, then we have a new grouping, 2. It still shows a 1 here, but we'll fix that in just a second. Then we see that we have 2, 2, 2, which is here, here, here. And then on the next streak, we still see a 2, but we want this to be a 3. Right? So what we want is every single time we have a start streak, we actually want this value to be to add 1, right? Because what that'll give us is we'll have a 1 and a 1, which is one grouping. Then we'll have a 2, 2, 2, 2, which is the second grouping. Then this will be a new grouping. This will be 3, and so forth. So we have to add 1 to this deal. So I'm going to duplicate this, and we're going to call this +1. This is just going to be a math column where we're going to add, I'm just going to put the letter A, +1, where A stands for this very last value, this user post index plus start of index of streak. Done. All right, so you see it adds 1 here. Okay, and so now we need to check to see if it's the start of a streak, then it should be this +1 value. Otherwise, it's going to be this original value. So this if then else will be if start streak, then +1, else original or index or something. Whatever title you want to make this clear. All right, so basically going to check to see, okay, if the start streak index is not empty, we want that +1 value here. Otherwise, we're going to get the original value here. Done. All right, so let's drag this if then else over here just a little bit, just so you can see the groupings now, right? So all of this array magic here, I know is kind of complicated, but what this ultimately gives us is now groupings based on dates, right? So we have here a 1 and a 1. Then we have a 2, 2, 2, 2. Then we have a 3. And as long as it keeps on going sequentially, then 3 will keep on going, right? So just so you can see what this looks like, I'm going to add a new row. I'm going to copy this, paste, and let's say April 2nd is our next post, right? Our grouping should still be 3, and it is 3 and 3, right? But if it's a new streak, let's say April 3rd, I only had a 1-day streak there, then this should be a new grouping. It should be 4, and it is. All right. So now we have some groupings just based on the date alone. We have some sequential groupings. And this is ultimately what we were after from the beginning. All right, so the reason why we're after this format is because now we can add this grouping to our original post ID, which is this day only plus email here, in order to form a grouping of itself. Okay, so let's add this math or this if then else back to the end, just so we can see things chronologically here in terms of our logic, our thinking. All right, so we're going to call this post ID plus grouping. Group number, maybe. Okay, done. So if we want to, this if then else could really just be called group number. Probably makes the most sense. And maybe this this first user post in this thing here that's really long, it could be like group number. And this is really group number plus 1. And this is then a group if group number. It's a little cleaner. Okay, so this is our post ID plus the if group number. And this should be, oh, I didn't mean to make it text. Let's delete that. But before I delete it, I want to copy the name. Delete. That should be a template column. All right, so template, post ID plus the group number. So this is going to be, 1-2. Where 1 stands for the day only plus email, which is our post ID, followed by the group number, the if group number. Done. Okay. So again, what that gives us is a unique grouping for each user in sequence. And now we can do a relation back to itself again to determine how many records exist of these values. So another relation column here. We're going to actually just duplicate this. We can get the same name. So we're going to do a relation of this to self. And we're going to relate this very last value back to itself again, which is the post's very last value. match multiple, done. Okay. Yeah, sorry, we don't want the post ID. We want the email plus group number. Yeah, the date ID, the post ID just helps us determine the sequence. But for the grouping, we actually want it grouped by the person and then what group it is. There we go. That looks better. So we see here that there are 2 records because there were 2 values in that first sequence. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 values, right, in this next sequence because there are 4 records in this streak. And then in this one, there's only 1, and then there's only 1 because we have 3 and then 4. Okay, so then the last step here is just to get a count. So I can get the count. We'll do a roll up. So we'll call this count streak. This will be a roll up of that relation we just created. This self relation, and we can get anything. We'll just grab the row ID, I guess, by calculating the count. And so now we see that this grouping has 2, this grouping has 4, and this grouping has 1. Well, I guess 1 and 1, right? All right, so to determine our longest streak, that's pretty easy. We can do that from actually the user sheet here. So back in the user sheet, I can grab a relation. We'll do a relation to posts. So we're going to relate the email, which is our unique identifier, back to the posts email and get all of them, match multiple. And then to get the longest streak, we just need that highest value of our count streak. Whatever the highest value is here, that must be our longest streak, in this case, 4. Right? So that's just a simple roll-up column. We can call this longest streak. Roll up of the relation. And we're going to grab the count streak. But we don't want to grab the count. We want to grab the maximum, 4. Okay, so we now have created our longest streak of 4. But what about our current streak? Right? In order to determine our current streak, we have to figure out what the count streak is of today, because that's where we're at, our current streak. But if we haven't posted yet today, then we should still grab the same value from yesterday, right? So we need either today's value or yesterday's value if we haven't yet posted today, because that'll be our current streak. All right, so we need to create one more column here, and this is going to be a if current streak, we'll call it. And basically what we're checking for here is whether or not today, or the timestamp is today, or was it yesterday? Because if so, then grab the count streak. So if then else, we're going to say if the current timestamp is within today, then grab the count streak. In this case, 1. However, if it's yesterday, we say we haven't posted yet today, then this value will all be blank, but we don't want blank. We want whatever was posted yesterday, right? So in that regard, we want so to find yesterday, we need the date plus 1. So this date only plus 1. So if the date only plus 1 is within today, then count streak. Okay. Otherwise, if it doesn't find today and it doesn't find yesterday, then we must be on a new streak anyway, and we'll just do else 1. Done. Okay. So we see here our current streak is currently 1. I guess the last thing to do would be to find some way to grab this 1 value and bring it back to the user sheet. All right, just so it's clear, because I know we have a lot of 1s in here, let's say our current streak is 2. So today is April 1st. So let's make this March 30th. And again, I guess I can make this March 30th because we've sorted our array. Okay. So again, our current streak should be 2. Oh, March 31st. Sorry. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so our current streak is 2. So the last step here is to determine the current streak at the user level. And so we need to find some way to relate the user sheet to the posts sheet in order to grab the last value from this column. So we need to figure out the last value here. A little tricky, but we can do this with a couple more lookups and relations. So I'm going to add a new column here. And we're going to do a single value because we want one value. We'll do a single value from the, we're going to get the last value from the post IDs of user sorted, right? This will give us the last ID of the post in chronological order, like that. So this is last or latest post ID. All right, done. Okay, then we can determine if this latest post ID, if it is the post ID of the record, then we can output something that will relate to the user sheet in that regard is the email. So an if then else column, we'll say if latest post ID, then email. So if then else, if the latest post ID is, and our post ID again is that date only email, then email, else nothing. So we're only ever going to have one of these records filled out, whichever the last one is sequentially, right? And even though I have an 8th post here, it's this 7th record that has the last post because chronologically, April 1st comes after March 31st. See that? All right, so this is the very last record. So now in our user sheet, we can relate to the latest post by relating our email address to the post's latest post email. We're not going to match multiple because there's only ever one. And what we're going to do is grab the current streak. So current streak is a lookup of the latest post if current streak 2. And there we go. So now we have the longest streak and their current streak. And again, we're using email address here. If you want to make this data more secure, what I recommend doing is actually using row IDs. And in the post sheet, put their row ID or their user ID here rather than emails. So then that way it's a little bit more anonymous, and that way users can't see email addresses here. But in all regards, now you have longest streak and current streak for each user. All right, so here we have Alan. Alan doesn't have any streaks yet, right? So maybe one last thing would be if longest streak is empty and current streak is empty, let's give them a 0 rather than just a blank nothing, right? Because I don't think it'll give him a 0 by default here because he doesn't have any posts yet. So might want one more thing here. We'll say add a column right. We'll say if, or let's say longest streak display, which is an if then else. And we'll say if longest streak is empty, then 0, else longest streak. And we'll do the same thing for the latest streak. So we'll just duplicate this. We'll say latest or current streak display. And we'll say if current streak is empty, then current streak, done. All right, and then we can just display this at the user level. If you want to do some more fun things by adding like do another template column and add a flame in front of these things, so you have like an emoji associated to it, that's, again, that's gravy. So now in my user profile sheet or anywhere where you're having your user data, you can now add however you want that information, whether you do it through a hint or maybe a basic table. And you can have just those two fields where you have your current streak and your longest streak. Like so. All right, so let's have Alan make a post. So this is just new post. And again, we want to just write the special values of the email address and the timestamp. So this is post number 1 for Alan. Add. So here's Alan's post. So his longest streak should be 1 and his current streak should be 1. There we go, 1 and 1. Right, let's pretend Alan posted yesterday. So I'll just paste this here. And we'll just change the date to March 31st. And it'll be post number 0 for Alan. So we're doing it sequentially. So his streak should be 2 and his longest streak should be 2. And it is. And you see how these numbers don't interfere with this person's at all, because we're using the email address as part of that unique identifier in the posts sheet. Right? And let's say Alan's posts, right? Let's say this was actually March 30th. Right? But now it's April 1st. So Alan still has a current streak of 2, and his longest streak is 2. But if he doesn't post today, his current streak should go back down to 1. In order to make sure that happens, we can change this 31st to March 29th. So there's a day in between here, right? And so his longest streak should still be 2, but because he didn't post yesterday, his current streak should be reset back to 1. And it did. Right? If you want this current streak, we could break this back down to 0. Current streak 0 if we want to as well. If you wanted to do that in the post sheet for the if current post, you just say else 0. And so then it should show 0 instead of 2 or instead of 1. But that's how you create streaks. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed this. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave me a comment below. And as always, thanks for watching.